Let's bring in the director of the CDC, Dr. Robert Redfield. Dr. Redfield, thank you for joining us again this morning. Vice President Pence said quite clearly yesterday that the CDC is revising school guidelines because the president thinks they are too tough. Should the doctors and scientists of the CDC be taking that kind of political direction from the president?
Well, thank you, George. I want to clarify, really what we're providing is different reference documents. So our guidelines are our guidelines, but we are going to provide additional reference documents to aid basically communities that are trying to reopen K through 12s. We're going to do guidance for parents or reference documents for parents and caregivers, reference documents for schools to understand better how to monitor for symptoms, reference documents for how to use face mask in the school setting, and reference documents for how to evaluate and monitor. So I think it's really important. It's not a revision of the guidelines. It's just to provide additional information to help the schools be able to use the guidance that we put forward.
Well, the Vice President said it was a revision and said he was doing it at the president's direction. Which guidelines are too tough? Which guidelines are impractical?
I think it's important, George, to realize, and you use the word guidelines. That's what CDC has done. They provide guidances. They're not requirements. And again, the purpose of them, and I think it's really important to emphasize to parents around this country, the purpose of those guidances is to help local jurisdictions open their schools. It's not a question of opening schools versus public health. My position is that the public health of the students of this nation is best served by getting these schools reopened.
But it reopened, but reopened safely. The idea is that you should reopen them safely. And the guidelines you had there said that kids should be 6 feet apart. There should be social distancing. There should be no communal spaces. Are you revising any of those guidelines at the direction of the president?
Right now, we're continuing to work with the local jurisdictions to how they want to take the portfolio of guidance that we've given to make them practical for their schools to reopen.
As you know, Dr. Redfield, we've been down this road before. The president complained about the CDC guidelines for reopening businesses earlier in the pandemic. The guidelines were revised, and we've seen this spike of cases all across the country. Aren't you worried that that is going to happen again?
Again, I think the important thing, George, that I want to emphasize is CDC has developed these guidances, these portfolio of strategies that we want to work with the local jurisdictions to see how they could be implemented in their schools to facilitate the reopening of schools. The one thing I really want to say that would personally sadden me, and I know my agency, is if individuals were to use these guidances that we put out as a rationale to keep schools closed. Because I said the public health interest of the students today is to get these schools reopened.
But sir, no one wants to keep the schools closed, but everybody wants to make sure the schools are safe before they are open again. And that's what I keep trying to ask you about. Which of these guidelines are you looking to relax? Should students be 6 feet apart?
I think we have to continue to work with the schools to look between the 6 feet apart, wearing face coverings, social distancing the seating, looking at changes in schedule to have different crowding. As I said, there's a whole portfolio that the schools can look at to see what's the right mix for them. It was intentionally non-prescriptive. Some people see that the spectrum of strategies that we put out there somehow say that everyone needs to do the entire spectrum. No, we put out a spectrum of strategies to help the local schools, which we're convinced, like you said, are committed to reopening these safely. Just like I want to say that CDC, myself personally, to the parents of this nation, we're committed to reopening these schools safely. Probably one of the most important issues we have to pay attention to is to make sure in the process we're protecting the vulnerable, whether they're vulnerable students with chronic medical conditions, whether they're vulnerable teachers. But the truth is, at this point, it's a critical public health initiative right now to get these schools reopened.
Which of these guidelines
and to do it safely, as you said.
Which of these guidelines are too tough? Which of these guidelines are impractical?
Again, I think it depends on how the schools put the portfolio together. Clearly, we see some individuals are concerned about the 6-foot distancing. Other individuals are concerned about face masks. Other individuals are concerned about rotating schedules. But I think this is why we put it there, as was said by one of your previous guests. These decisions about schools are local decisions. We're prepared to work with any school and school district to see how they can take these guidances, this portfolio of strategies and do it in a way that they're comfortable that they can reopen their schools safely.
Final question. Arizona, Florida, and South Carolina now lead the world in new cases. Are they doing enough to control it? Is it time for more stringent lockdowns?
Well, you know, George, it's really important, and I'm glad you asked the question, to re-emphasize that we are not defenseless against this virus. All right, we have powerful weapons. Some people don't think they're powerful because they're kind of straightforward, but they're powerful. That is the social distancing, that is the face mask, that is the hand washing, and that is being smart about selectively shutting down businesses that, you know, I think encourage irresponsible behavior, for example, bars. So again, as the governors that have seen this resurgence begin to take steps, as we've seen in Texas, for example, and Florida, to reinstitute really vigilance among the citizens of those states for those simple things of distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands, and closing the bars.
Dr. Redfield, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, George.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.